Hey everyone, CerebralTackle back again. And whether it's your first time doing it or you just need a refresher course, today we're going to cover the proper way to fill a spinning reel spool. I see a lot of tutorials out there on this, and a lot of them bug me to no end because they get it wrong. Today, we're going to teach you how to do it right. The first thing you want to do is make sure you have the right line for your particular reel. These reels come in a variety of sizes, and each one has its specific wheelhouse of line that will go properly on that spool. If you choose a line that is too large of a diameter or too small of a diameter, you're going to have problems. So look at your spool. This is an ultralight. It's a Quantum Optics 10 series. And as you see right here, it takes 125 yards of 4-pound test. It's an ultralight. Well, 4-pound test is exactly what we're going to be putting on it today. Let me show you how we do it. The next thing we're going to need to do is affix our line to the spool. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an improved clinch knot for this because it will cinch down to the spool. I'm going to come around once, come around twice around the spool, and then I'm going to do the nice little twisty around 5 to 7 times. Now the line is super hard to see, guys, because like I said, it's 4-pound test. And forgive me for this awkwardness here. I'm having to look through everything. Keep in mind, with this kind of knot, the smaller diameter line you have, the more times you'll need to twist it around to get it effective. So now that I have it around the spool twice, and now I've got it twisted about 7 times around itself, I'm going to take and run the line through the loop at the bottom. This is going to be almost impossible to see, guys. There we go. I got it through the bottom. Then I'm going to take that loop and that tag in, I'm going to come back up to the top loop here. And there we go. That makes it easier to see. Sorry about that. Guys, I apologize for the crummy camera work. I've got one camera and one tripod, and that's what this whole operation is run on. So, if you don't know how to look or don't know how to tie an improved clinch knot, there's lots of sites that give you a good tutorial. I'll probably do one at some point as well. So now we're going to cinch that knot down to the spool good by taking the tag in here in this hand, the main line in this hand, and just squeezing it down. I'll also use my thumbnail to kind of hold the knot down there as it cinches. Now it's good and tight to the spool, as you see right there. This is also very important. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to take and you're going to clip the tag end off. You do not want a lot of line hanging off of there. So you're going to identify your tag end, which is this little sucker right here. You're going to come right on down here close to your spool. And you're going to clip that little sucker off right down there. Being very careful not to get your main line. So you now have your line attached to your spool. You're going to manually flip the bail. Now, you probably have had the problem before. You've put a lot of line on your reel and it's been really bad lopsided, made it hard to cast. I'm going to show you a nice little hack to get it on nice and perfectly smooth. This little hack will help you go a long way towards getting your line level on your spool. Now it's going to be hard to see here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few laps around to start it, and what I'm waiting for is for the line to come off perfectly level from underneath our bail here right into the center of the spool. Now let's see if you can see that there. Okay, do you see how you kind of eyeball it right there and you have the line coming from underneath your bail right there in the dead center? That's right where you want it. Now, you've seen I've just started at the beginning and made a few laps to get to this point. That's fine. It's not going to go on unlevel because here's what you're going to do. Once you get your line where it's perfectly in the center of the spool starting off, you're going to stop what you're doing and you're going to flip that bail. Your instant anti-reverse, if your reel has it like this one, and most modern reels do, no matter how inexpensive they are, it's going to lock it right there. So now you're going to take off this line. So when you start back to reeling, it's going to start right where you left it, in the dead center of that spool, to make sure you get on every inch of this line as level and perfect as possible. The next is a common mistake I see a lot of people make when spooling their reels. They don't pay attention to which direction the line is coming off the spool as opposed to which direction their bail arm is turning on their spinning reel. In this particular spinning reel, your bail moves in a counterclockwise motion. Check your line. Which way does it come off the spool? If you turn around here to the back, it's coming off in a clockwise motion. If you turn around here to the front, lo and behold, it's coming off in a counterclockwise motion. So you want your reel matched up in the same way that the line is coming off the spool. That way you don't get line twist, and that way when you throw out, you flip your bail and you start to reel back in, you're not actually unreeling line off of your reel. As you can see, today we're going to be using Seaguar Basics 4-pound fluorocarbon. It should be a wonderful trout line. But as much as I love Seaguar and I use their products for 90% of what I throw, here's what I don't like. They have these notches from the way the factory's molded with their spools, and when you try to take line off of them, your line gets caught in here, gets nicked, and it's a real pain in the arse. So what I do is I just take a piece of Scotch tape, just a little piece. I find that little notch, and I'll go over it with just a little bit to go over the top there, and then I'll fold it down. It doesn't make it perfect, but it makes it a hell of a lot better so that your line doesn't get caught in that and get nicks as your line's coming off the spool. Okay folks, I'm going to teach you something else that goes a long way towards getting a line on your reel with as little tangles as possible. I take and I use a damp rag, and I gently lay my line, just fold it over in the layers of it, like so. Close it on there, and I apply just a little bit of tension, not a lot. I hold it out in front of my spool, and then I'll reel from there. What that does, two things. Not only does it add a little bit of tension to your line as you're taking it off the spool, but it also gets it wet as it goes on. That will help it conform to your spool a bit better. Now you see there that tape, it caught a little bit right there. Like I said, it's not perfect. That's why I said it's not perfect. But hitting the edge of that tape is a hell of a lot better than hitting that sharp edge of that plastic. And I'll just sit here and I'll spool on my line. Now that squeaking is that nice little wet line going on there. Now I'm going to show you another quick hack. Every once in a while here I'm going to stop. I'm going to take my line, I'm going to pull it against the drag. I cinch the drag down good and tight doing this. I'm doing this so that you can kind of get a bit more pressure on that line to cinch it down to that spool. And I won't even rely on the drag sometimes. I'll just grab it, the spool, hold it tight. This is 4-pound test line, so I don't want to do it very hard. And just kind of pull it there against the spool. That'll cinch the line to the spool a bit better. Then I'll grab the line again, and pick up right where I left off. I'll stop and do that about, I don't know, 3 or 4 times through a spool. Now another key is you do not want to overfill your spool. As your line starts to get to the edge of the spool, you want to leave between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch gap between where your line is and the edge of the spool up here at the top. You want to be very careful about that. Overfilling your spool is another way to end up with a lot, and I mean a lot, of line twist and loop knots just pouring off of your spool. If you've ever had a spinning reel where your line comes off like a freaking slinky, it's usually because you've overfilled it and you didn't cinch it to your reel as you're putting it on. So every once in a while, I'm going to stop, check, see where I'm at, in the way of depth on the line, pull it a few times, grab the spool. I'm also doing this, grabbing the spool and pulling it extra tight on this one, because this is a ultralight reel. Its max drag is only like 4 or 6 pounds, which isn't enough pressure really to do much of anything, except for to fight a big trout, which is, you know, what it's built for. Now you don't want to apply too much pressure with your rag. It's fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon will retain heat. You don't want to weaken your line putting it on, okay? However, a cool rag like this, just very lightly, I'm not squeezing it tight, just very lightly gapped in there will be all you need. Just that spool again there. It's usually easier with a line spooling station, but mine's in storage, so I'm doing it the old-fashioned way. Now, this isn't going on perpendicular. It is going on parallel like it's supposed to. It's because the spool is facing up in the same direction that the line will be coming off as it's going on the spool. So it's the same as if it was laying like this. Whatever you do, never, ever, ever take your line off of your filler spool and put it onto your spinning spool like this, perpendicular. That will wreck your line because it's now coming off in an opposite or a perpendicular position as opposed to where it's going on your line, and it'll cause that line to rotate and twist as it goes onto your reel. That's a freaking disaster you want no part of. I'm going to stop here and see where I'm at. Cinch it down here a bit. Still got some line to go on here. This filler spool of Seaguar is, I think it's like a 200-yard spool, filler spool. If there's any camera work problems, blame the missus. Mrs. CT is holding this thing at the moment. So being that this reel holds 125 of 4, it's not going to hold this whole filler spool, obviously. So if you get the whole filler spool on there, you've done way too much. Okay, let's see where we look like we're getting pretty close. Kind of my tape in kind of an obnoxious way there that I'm not used to it. That tape trick works quite a bit of the time. Now, what I'm about to say is going to sound like a real a-hole of a thing to say. Now, like I said, I love Seaguar and I entrust them in most of my line needs. But I have found before that I've found spools, let's just say, they didn't have on them what they were supposed to have on them. And I said, if you get to the end of one of these spools and you've taken all the line off, you put on way too much. Like I said, there's supposed to be a 200 yard filler spool, I'm not to that 1/8 of an inch yet, and I almost have all the line off this filler spool. Now I say that, there's some left, but boy, it's getting a bit weak. So I'm gonna, you do not want to overfill a spool, but I'm gonna err on the side of caution. And I'm going to start to kind of wrap it up here. I'm going to take just a little bit more off. Catching on my tape again there. Okay. That's looking pretty good. Cinch it down. Now this reel is also going to somebody who's new to spinning reels. Miss J. Carr. This is your trout reel getting spooled up here, gal. And it's going on nice and smooth. And we're about where I want to be there. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cinch it down one more time here. Then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go ahead and clip this line. Okay everyone, I got out the trusty tape measure. We're going to measure our gap now. What we're measuring is here between where the line's filled up and then the edge of the spool. I got it crimped right there at the 2-inch marker. Lay it in there, and I know it's hard to see it, but yeah, I've got exactly an 1/8 of an inch gap there. So I eyeballed that pretty correctly. I got pretty lucky there. In addition to putting the line on wet and cinching it down every now and again, one other thing that I love to do before taking my reels out on their first trip after a fresh set of line, I love to hit it with the Blakemore Reel Magic. This stuff is great. Now I don't put a lot on there, but here's what I do. I'll pop off the little it comes in an aerosol and just a regular pump as well. You can get it a lot of Walmarts. You can get it almost anywhere these days. If not, just look it up there online. It's called Blakemore Reel Magic. I'll take and I'll just hit it a couple times here. You can get too much. I don't do a lot. After hitting it, I'll take a bit of paper towel here and I'll just wipe down any overspray. Maybe hit it once more. Wipe it down. What Reel Magic does is it'll help your line conform to your reel a little bit better, take out a little bit of the memory. The memory is all that tight, slinky-like squiggles that you get on the filler spool that are then transferred to your reel as you're trying to load up a spool for the first time. Blakemore Reel Magic helps take that out, helps get your line conformed to your actual spool that you're putting it on a little bit better, removes some of that excess memory, and just, helps keep things a bit more tidy. As you can see, we're almost done. We have our 1/8 of an inch gap so that we haven't overfilled our spool. Overfilling will cause major line twist, kinks, knots. Your line will want to just spring off at rest like a slinky. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So we have our 1/8 of an inch gap. We've cinched it down on the spool along the way. We've applied the line wet. We've hit it with a little Reel Magic. We've wiped off the overspray. What I'm about to tell you is something other folks won't. Even though you put on your line wet, you cinched it down to your spool a few times, you got your Reel Magic on it, it's still going to take a few trips before it syncs up perfectly with your reel. That line's still going to be fresh. So I'm going to tell you something that you need to keep in your mind when you take that fresh, newly spooled reel out on the water. After you cast it, of course, close your bail manually. Always close it manually. Never use the handle to close your bail. Flip your bail manually. And then, as you go to reel in your lure, your bait, whatever it is, take your hand that you're holding the rod in and grab your rod way up here. Okay, way up here, 6 or so inches above the reel, right? And grab your line up there against your rod, like so. And then reel in. You'll pull the line taut, and you'll reel it in for the first few turns. Because what happens is, when this line is new and your bail is open, a little access is going to want to come off. If you just flip the bail and start reeling and you catch one of those loops in here, you're going to have a little loop sticking out here that your line, every time you cast and reel in, is going to be hitting against. And when you're using something like fluorocarbon, that's going to retain heat, it's going to create a weak spot, and then when you get down to that loop on the line, it's going to break. Always remember, first few trips out, until this line gets perfectly conformed to your spool, we throw it out there, close the bail, grab that line, hold on to it as you make your first few reel turns. This way you pull the line taut, you've got any loops out of it, and it's going on the spool nice and fresh and straight like it's supposed to. Trust me, that will go miles towards your freshly spool reeled staying beautiful. The last thing we're going to do, we're going to take good notes. I have these old line reminder stickers that I don't even think they make anymore. You can get them in different brands, or you can just print one out yourself. But I'm going to write the type of line, the pound test, the date it was put on. I'm going to take this sticker, I'm going to fix it to my rod handle. And I'm going to take a nice little piece of Scotch tape and go around that spot on the rod handle where it is to kind of give it a little extra protection from water and from the ink smearing. This will let you know when you put on that line. That way down the line you're not having to think, when did I spool this up? What's on this again? It'll tell you everything you need to know at just a quick glance. So I've got my little label made out here. I'm going to slap it on the rod, throw a little Scotch tape over it, and we're going to be ready to go. Well, folks, I think that about wraps it up. We should have covered all the steps needed in getting line on a spinning reel proper. Hopefully it'll keep you from getting line twist and a bunch of loop knots and wind knots and all that crap. So, theoretically, we should have got you there. Sorry for all the janky camera work. It's a two-person operation with one camera between us. What do you do? Anyway, J-Car, it'll be heading to you soon. Ready to fish. So, folks, thanks for joining us today. Get out there on the water and keep it wet.